minutes. While we're waiting, everybody start doing the reading. And have at it. Everything's unofficial until approved. I'm working on my collation skills. You got both? 5 and 12?
No, actually, I just have 12 and you have 5, so give me
Five?
5 and give me that. Who's over 12?
Well, okay, so well, we've already approved the minutes for the 5th.
I move that we approve the minutes for the 12th.
Let's open the meeting.
Oh,
Give me another, I'm gonna give another 30 seconds, and then if Dick's not showing up. I figure I'd give Dick as much time as I give Sarah. It's fair.
Appreciate that.
You want the 12th?
Yeah.
And you did, thank you.
Give a parcel, that's even more.
Right there.
Thank you.
Well, I'll just give you till at least 05, and then if you're not here,
Yep.
I get started.
That makes sense.
So, Dick's a full professor too, so.
Certainly don't want to miss the approval of the minutes.
Well, before we open the meeting, were you able to check the video then for the vote? Or we'll just reapprove them, right, this week, tonight? So you don't need to look at the 5th, other than we're gonna reapprove them this evening, because if you notice on the minutes of the 12th, we don't have appropriate listing for who motioned to approve the December 5th minutes. And we did not have a recording of the meeting to verify. All right, I'm going to call a meeting to order. Let's get this thing started. We have a busy evening. Looks like I have 6 members. All 6 members will be voting. Huntley, you're as an alternate. You are only able to be an alternate for 1 regular member. Therefore, you will not be voting this evening.
We're 7.
Pardon?
7.
Dick's not here.
7 members.
Dick is not here. The only person who can replace Dick is Dick or somebody from the selectmen's appointed
Okay, gotcha.
representative, and there is no such person here. So we only have 6 members this evening, but it is a quorum. Ask you to review and approve minutes for the December 12th meeting. As you may note, there is, rather than try to get Will to go back and look and see if we have a tape, which I know we have up by now, Hank, thank you. If we can just reapprove the minutes from December 5th, do they have a motion to approve?
Move that we reapprove the minutes from December 5th.
Scott motions to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Kathleen has seconded that motion to approve minutes for December 5. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Minutes for December 12th. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve from David,
Second.
second from Scott. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. All right. That wonderful opportunity for any public comments, since we have public this evening. For any public in any matter not before the planning board tonight. So if that's some wonderful thing we should be looking at, talking about, please let us know. Okay? All right. Pardon? Yeah, we can.
What?
The red book.
Oh, you have one? I have one, yeah.
All right. Let's get to the meat of the evening. What do we call that? Short-term rental regulations. Between the meeting last and now, we did get a proposal from our lawyer that incorporated all the things to which we agreed, not the things to which we did not agree. And so I think for this evening, it's a matter of taking a look and seeing if we like the wording that's here, if there's some changes that ought to be incorporated. With a reminder that any changes that are substantial we'll need to make sure that we're going to provide an updated copy to the public hearing group as well. We'll have to, I expect, repost whatever we do this evening, just simply to make sure that the most current version is out there as soon as we can. Anything that's housekeeping, we change a word, a the to an and, or, shoulda to coulda, whatever, those are, I think those are well within our realm of things. If we have things that we would like to incorporate in, I think we're gonna have to hold them till the public hearing, but we can talk about them at the public hearing. Basically say, here are the changes that we as a group have agreed to that we need to modify based on our own look-see. And I think that's a fair thing. That's our task for this evening.
I do have a technicality on here, and Julie Dwight mentioned it to me. When we do number 16, application procedure, and it is, 6 definitions and stuff like that, it needs to be in where the definitions are. But everything after that, there's already, number 16 is already on there.
But we would just adjust the numbers.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we're familiar with that as a concern. The intent was not to try to, which we will need to do as part of the warrant article. We'll have to do the, Sarah knows this better than all of us
No,
here.
I just remember.
She does, but
I
we'll,
see that it's a technicality, and you were, that's
Yeah.
right,
Yes.
ahead of time.
yeah, I mean, this could have been X.1 if we, the intent was really to say, here's a new section, the new section will be incorporated into, we'll have to decide really where it fits, and then the renumbering, God help
Then
us.
renumbering,
Yeah.
that's,
Right. And
I just didn't know
that's
that's
how
where
it's
it, that's all.
And that's how it's,
That sounds good.
so
Okay.
that's not substantive,
No, it's not.
but I appreciate the concern, and it has already been surfaced as a concern.
I have a substantive addition that we should have. And it's kind of triggered by the article in the paper today. And that is, we should probably have in the ordinance as a requirement is that they apply for a license for the rooms and meals tax. Apply the license because that then, they're required then to keep records, and also the rooms and meals tax goes not only to the state, but a portion of that comes back to the town. So, and this would be a way, the keeping the records, which should be available on a right-to-know basis, and that would allow us then to keep track of how many times something is rented, and especially those which are not owner occupied, which are limited to 25. So we just require them because they are
Does that,
subject to.
does that license go with the property or with the applicant?
Now that I don't know. Since it was in today's paper and I didn't have a lot of time to go chase it down, I do have it.
Okay, it's likely it goes with the applicant, just based on the nature of how tax works.
Right, and then that would be my expectation. But the approval would go with the property. So you get the town's approval. I'm not sure how those two sort of mesh.
Okay, and then they have to renew their business tax license every 2 years. On June 30th of each odd-numbered year.
Okay, so that's a state requirement that they do that.
Mhm.
Is it possible then that we could ask for proof of that when they're doing the permit?
Yeah,
I mean, would that be a reasonable thing to say, it's a legal requirement for them to have done so?
I think it's reasonable. I think that, you know, the hotel owners and other folks though would be, you know, it helps to level the playing field. I think that's a very legitimate,
right.
I know that I think Airbnb goes ahead and collects that tax, remits it to the state. I know that Airbnb, I don't know about the RDO.
The Airbnb is the only one right now, as far as I'm aware.
And then the state, would they have to mandate that? Because they normally.
They do mandate that anyone who rents
I mean,
pays tax, yes.
no, I understand that, but I mean, as far as short-term rentals, I mean, suppose somebody's only there for 3 days. I mean, it's kind of like, who mandates that they're gonna do that?
It's already an RSA out there that says that if you rent your property and you receive monies, you're supposed to pay a tax.
I mean, all the hotels do it, so,
Mhm.
you know,
So does that apply to long-term rentals too, or where's the break point?
I
It's
don't
the
think
break
it
point's
does.
1 to 85 days.
There's a definition in there about short-term versus long-term.
And, you know,
Tax.
is the 185, is that a state definition or is that the Conway?
Yeah, this is what frequently asked questions from DRA.
Okay.
And it says here, tax must be collected on all room rentals less than 185 consecutive days. And when you reach the 185th day, operator must refund to the patron the tax monies that have been collected. And then there's other RSAs that kick in.
Right, so we don't need to respin that. We just simply need to.
No, just say, because we're saying our short-term rentals are 30 days or less.
Right.
And so we would require proof of room and sales
Right,
tax.
proof of the license, and if Airbnb does it, then they just provide the operator with proof that they can give to us.
Right, I think Airbnb, you know, it's not done per operator. I think it's Airbnb. I'm kind of guessing right now, because I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing Airbnb has their own license or something, so they go ahead and collect that tax and basically takes that responsibility away from the property owner. But many people list their properties on not just Airbnb, but
Right.
VRBO and HomeAway. So if the others don't do that, then a license, et cetera, would be unnecessary.
I also did a little check online, as you were saying, have how many rentals in town. So I just went on Airbnb and tried to find out what was for short-term rental for Jackson. And they say, oh, they're 750, but no, it's not in Jackson.
No,
It's the
that's
whole
that's the
area.
whole area.
And so if you zoom in on Jackson, there are only, you know, a handful.
But it only shows those available for the dates that you put in.
Right, and so I changed the dates, I changed to,
But if there's another site called AirDNA, which sort of monitors not just Airbnb, but VRBO and HomeAway. And according to AirDNA, Jackson kind of at the moment is going from about 100 to 150 depending on the season. So 150 or so in the summer, 100 around now is what they list for active listings.
okay, so,
And some of those are, you know, second homes and, you know, it's a mix of different things.
yeah.
Yeah, and what AirDNA, I'm guessing, probably doesn't account for are any short-term rentals that are done strictly through real estate agencies that are local. Or done just on Craigslist or, you know, that type of thing. I mean, the short-term rental thing existed before Airbnb and all of that. It just was done through real estate offices and privately.
All right. I agree with you that we should request that as part of the permitting process.
Yeah,
And I'm not sure exactly in terms of enforcement on that, if you say, you know, somebody says, look, I do all Airbnb only and I don't need to do that, then are we asking them then to get a license for something? Are we asking them to do something more? And I think we would be, and is that a reasonable thing to do?
I think it is.
I don't know what the charge is for it.
The RSA's,
or,
the sales tax.
But if Airbnb, if they only rent through Airbnb, if Airbnb does this and they're complying with the state rules. They are paying the tax.
Are we sure of that?
Well, we can have them sign some type of document that that's.
Right,
what
I just,
rents
I
it.
guess the point is just that it doesn't hurt to have a license in that
Right,
situation.
right.
And there's nothing stopping them from renting it outside of it.
Right, and so is it unreasonable to ask, I guess, is the question.
If some of them may rent it on their own,
Right.
also using
Right.
Airbnb.
My sense is it's not unreasonable. Any
I agree.
different perspective on that? I mean, if somebody says, yeah, it's a $250 charge to get the silly license,
it doesn't sound like there is a
But,
charge.
but I don't think it is. I think it's
No.
just,
Yeah, I don't think
I
it's unreasonable.
think
There's no cost.
the
There's no
state
cost.
tries to make it as easy as possible for
Yeah.
you to pay a tax.
Was it 8%, Scott?
It's 9%.
Oh, I don't know.
9%?
9%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if there's no cost, then I think it's reasonable to ask the figure.
or if it's a nominal cost.
Anything over 36 cents.
That's the limit.
9%
charge.
tax assessed on patrons of hotels or any facility with sleeping accommodations, and restaurants on rooms and meals costing 36 cents or more.
Well,
36 cents. Can't buy a Tootsie Roll for that.
Yeah, you can't even get a donut.
Okay.
All right.
Would that be?
So I think that's a reasonable add. Where might we set that as far as the permitting, maybe, application procedure?
Yeah.
So probably conditional use permit application to operate a short-term rental for the town board of selectmen, 16.3.32 on this.
Just add another dot.
Right.
So,
Or do you put it under 16.4, responsibility of the owner?
I think this is more, to me, it sounds a little more like, you know, you get a permit from the town, you get a license from the state. The responsibilities of the owner are more, you know, making sure garbage is taken out and that kind of stuff. So, you know, this feels a little more.
all right, so we're gonna add wording, something to the effect that the applicant must obtain,
So proof of.
show proof of,
The rooms and meal, I think they call it license.
you know, specific wording for what it's called?
Let's see, what is rooms and meals tax license.
Like, should replace 16.3.3, right in there?
And then push the numbers, subsequent numbers up one.
Yeah.
All right, so are we putting a whole new section, or are we including that as dot two, or going for
Make
the
it
whole?
16.3.3 and then push the numbers.
Okay. Everybody good with that?
Yep.
So one, I think, small change that Jay Henry asked that we consider is in 16.3.5B, where we say, as part of the application process, the dwelling unit has doing master plan, section 3, blah, 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 must pass a joint inspection by the fire department and the building inspector, which shall include the following. Jay asked that we make it shall pass an inspection by either the fire department or the building inspector. We feel that it needed to be both, and by having it be either, if one happens to be not available, the other one can cover. And that would get things done expeditiously.
So just change the and to an or.
Yeah, and then remove the joint. So, and inspection.
So the building inspector, they will still be looking for all of these same.
Yeah.
Right. Both of them.
We'll agree to, let's pass an inspection by the fire department or the building inspector.
Which include
And that removes the wording that we must pass a joint, which I thought quite interesting. Anytime you can do that.
Also, when I was going through this, the conditional use permit application, I was reading someplace, and I don't know where my notes are, that, it said something about having already have to have this information available through our master plan. We don't have anything in our master plan at all about conditional use permit.
Well, the conditional use permit is not a master plan thing, that's
It's a zoning.
it's a process, or, way of handling certain situations. It's a land use methodology, I guess, that's what you call it.
Well, we were going through that 67421. Okay, down at, yeah. No, that was 62421.
16.3.4 is 674.21 too. So good.
It was 16.3.2 on the conditional use permit. It said something in there about having to have the, have it through the master plan, the town's master plan,
Is that in,
to get the authority.
It's 674, 67421, Roman numeral 2.
okay. That's referenced in 16.3.4.
It is.
For last line, 16.3.4.
Well, it's-
has to do with the conditional use permit and, you know, just a procedure for the application. And it needs to needs support from the master plan, which we don't have support for this in the master plan.
Using a conditional use permit?
Yes,
Where does it say that in the RSA?
yes.
Mm-hmm.
67421 gets its authority from 67416, which,
Yeah, the chair recognizes one of our RSA scholars from the public, Mr. Jerry Dougherty. Do you have a comment, please?
Just to help Kathleen out there, the authority that you're taking for this, 67421, is basically innovative land use controls. It gets its authority from 67416, which in 67421 gets its authority from 67416 for the innovative land use control, which is what you're using as authority for it. That requires that it be driven by the master plan. And I can't find anything in your master plan that refers to this.
So where does it say that in 16?
67416.
Yeah.
An innovative land use control adopted under 67416 may be, which 67421 takes its authority from, may be required when supported by the master plan and shall contain within its, you're fairly specific on how this will be regulated, but you're not specific in your authority under 67421 that gets its power from the master plan.
Jerry, what would you perceive that would have to look like in the master plan then, in order to see that? I mean, we have a lot of things in the master plan in terms of how, for example, we wish to maintain the certain character of town, and that we recognize the variety of uses of property and that sort of thing. I agree with you that we may not have anything specific for short-term rentals.
Well,
But what would you perceive we would have to?
Well, in fact, that's one of the things that I also have. I mean, I'm getting off topic here a little bit, but what you're referring to you're referring to 1621 to preserve the traditional character of residential neighborhoods that can be negatively impacted by this type of use. You're saying that that's your purpose, which you can pull that from the master plan in some form, but this regulation, by permitting short-term rentals, doesn't meet the requirements of 1621 or 1622. You do meet the requirements of 1623 in the inspection process, but I don't see how you meet the 1621 or 1622 you're saying at one point you're doing this to...
We're trying to strike a balance, and that's preserving.
Yeah, but you're not doing that. I mean,
But that's the
I would be hard pressed for you to show me where in your master plan you're getting the authority to use 16.
Wait, you're saying that we don't have in the master plan the authority for using innovative land controls?
No. You can have innovative land use control,
Yeah.
but if you read the purpose and the background of that regulation, that RSA, it's rather specific. And it says that the master plan needs to be specific in that regard. I mean, I'm sure your attorney has vetted this.
And has, so here, but for me, let me flip this the other side.
And I don't want to go long-winded on this.
No, I appreciate what you're saying, but let me flip it the other way. If you argue it that what you've described is that we need to wait another 10 years before we can have authorization to do something, and, well, I'm just following the argument down.
But you don't need to wait 10 years to update your master plan.
Well, master
That's
plan.
that's the maximum you can go.
But
You can
let me-
do-
let
you
me-
can do a
let me-
master plan
Let me
every
play
year.
the devil's advocate more. If what you're saying is that by not having anything specific about short-term rentals specifically, then we should not do anything and therefore allow them, and in fact, by doing so, incorporate them by saying we have as a body decided that we should not do anything and therefore allow what's happening now to continue unabated or uncontrolled. And how does that fit with the master plan? The argument, taken to its extreme, suggests that we are failing to do so by not doing anything. Therefore, by doing something, we are at least preserving something. By not doing anything, we're not doing anything. We're allowing it just to be.
Well, just as an alternative viewpoint, Conway decided that it didn't have the authority to do what it wanted to do, and therefore was slowing the process down so that they could get the authority, proper authority, to do what they wanted to do, first by definitions and then by having, in other words, creating the definitions first, so that it would meet the terms of the innovative land use, if you want to use that. But one correction, you don't need to wait 10 years to do a master
So
plan.
then I'll play the devil's advocate the other way. Can we just agree this evening to add to our master plan and amend our master plan to include a sentence that will enable it? Well,
I mean, you can
Just to-
decide, you and
to-
your attorney can decide any way you want to
right, no,
decide.
I'm trying to use your argument to understand it and to make sure that we aren't in a position where we're not doing anything, because I think that is an abrogation of our responsibility. I think
Can
I mean,
I
that the-
ask for just a clarification? So Jerry, are you saying that the master plan doesn't give us authority to use innovative land use controls?
No,
So you're saying that
the innovative land use control is this.
I know.
Addressing short-term rentals
So you-
is this.
right. So you're saying that the master plan doesn't give us authority to use innovative land use controls?
That's not what I'm saying.
To regulate short-term rentals?
I'm saying that the innovative land use RSA
Yep.
gets its authority from 16.
Mhm.
16 requires that the authority come from, as all planning board regulations,
Well, I'm-
all planning board regulations, as you know, Scott, should come from the master plan. That's the purpose of the master plan.
Yeah, but the master plan is it's a static document. Things change faster than the master plan changes. But I'm trying to understand what exactly the master plan doesn't give us authority to do in this situation.
I guess I'd turn the question around. Show me in the master plan where it speaks to this ordinance.
Short-term rentals.
Yes.
And the master plan asks us to, it asks us to preserve the rural environment, which I take not as just the physical environment, but the rural community.
And
that's exactly.
And then you have to explain to me how permitting short-term uses does that.
Because we're permitting them in situations that benefit the community in the residential district, and we're regulating them. And we're also permitting them in the commercial district in a less regulated fashion. And so to me, that's supporting the community part of Jackson.
I mean, doesn't the master plan have to have some flexibility? I mean, this whole short-term rental thing is a very newer phenomenon. And it would seem to me that.
Actually, it's not.
I'm sorry?
It's not in Jackson.
Well,
It's
is-
new in the sense.
The way it's marketed has changed,
yes, but it's,
but the purpose of it hasn't.
But the scale of it has changed dramatically.
yeah.
And so well, we can agree to disagree. I think that the master plan gives us plenty of authority to regulate something like short-term rentals. If we
And,
feel
and,
that-
and then, and again, I just ask you to show me in the master plan where it does that.
Overall land use and development goal, maintain and enhance the economic health of the town and provide adequate social and municipal services for the townspeople in a manner consistent with preserving the rural village character of the town while managing land use, regulating the development to ensure wise stewardship of the town's natural resources is our overall. And within that, you could say that what that's saying is that, yes, that we want to have economic health, but we also don't want that to, you don't want to have a business that's going to then disrupt natural resources, the other things, or the rural village character. And so what our regulations of the short-term rentals are trying to do it so that they're staying within the rural village character. In other words, you don't have it
So by permitting short-term rentals,
with
as this regulation does, you're preserving what you're describing?
No, we're promoting
we're permitting the economic health, enhancing and maintaining and enhancing the economic health, but regulating the short-term rentals. In other words, you're allowing the business to go on, but you don't want the business to go on to the point where it becomes detrimental. That's what your regulations are holding it in check, attempting to.
And again, I don't follow your logic, sir. It doesn't.
Okay,
I mean, you're saying that short-term
this is
rentals
not
are
a public- okay.
detrimental to the rural
Please.
character.
This is not a public hearing. I
Right.
ask you, please, to stand down.
I
Thank
will.
you. We can agree to disagree.
And I would only say it's a balance, that they're neither necessarily detrimental, nor are they necessarily positive.
In most cases-
They're balanced with everything else, and
In most cases, they're a residential use.
they have a positive aspect until they get to a point where they have a negative aspect. And we're trying to keep them in the positive part of the part of them.
And I would also, for the board's purposes, the recommendation for use on this was vetted with our legal counsel. He is the one who recommended our use and references in this regard, and felt that we were adequately covered within our master plan and within the RSAs. However, I appreciate Jerry's comment, and I would say if someone were to challenge us on this, that would be incumbent on the board on some future time to make an amendment to the master plan in order to accommodate that. I'm not sure what the wording would look like, but I would consider looking at that and determining whether or not there was additional language required. My sense is that I tend to agree with what Scott and Sarah are saying, and also what we were advised by our legal counsel, that we are satisfactorily covered. Jerry, thank you for your time. If you don't bring it up, somebody else will.
I also had another question about, when somebody comes to apply for a use, and they have to go to the selectmen for an application, that means the town offices.
Mm-hmm.
And, and then they have to come back to us when they get their application. And we only meet 12 times a year.
Yeah, too bad.
Because then it has to go back to the selectmen and go back here. That's going to be a couple months.
Too bad.
Okay? Could you be challenged
We
on that?
also, no, that's what it is. We also hold up people buying homes. We also hold up people developing properties. We also hold up people doing a whole bunch of things based on whether or not we approve or not. We had an issue with a subdivision most recently. It took us 4 months to complete it.
Mhm.
Somebody was not able to make a home purchase because of that.
Mhm.
Was it our delay? Yes, it was. And it's our process, and it's a monthly process, and yes, we tried to move it along in the interim. But if there was a vote required,
And once there's the vote, we have done the paperwork signing and so on outside of a meeting.
I just didn't know if you realized how long this process was taking place, and when stuff goes to the selectmen and there's an application or everything else, who's gonna be regulating that? And, I mean, are you expecting the girls at the town offices to be doing this stuff?
Could,
the selectman's office, if we put a regulation in place, the selectmen are responsible for implementing a regulation.
No matter how, yeah, okay.
Regardless, it's part of their responsibility. We also have built in here anticipation that expenses will be covered. If they need to hire additional people to do that, or if they need to authorize additional hours for people to accomplish that, then it's their responsibility to.
Okay, so we're putting it back in the hands of the selectmen then, I mean, or starting.
As all things are, they're required.
well, could we put in a conditional approval that would allow somebody to rent their house conditionally, and then the approval process would maybe happen later? Wouldn't that be reasonable?
Sounds like a loophole.
I'm sorry?
Sounds like a potential loophole.
Well, I think it's a short-term loophole that obviously would not be.
So what if they don't meet, they don't pass
Well,
inspection?
I think where I'd be comfortable with something like that is if it gains Board of Selectmen approval, and now it's simply waiting for us to approve the Board of Selectmen's approval, and I can't really imagine many situations where we would turn around and not approve, because we're sort of approving their approval, we're not really approving the application itself at that point. And so I can't imagine any situation where we wouldn't follow through with an approval.
Well, I
And
mean,
so having that conditional
You
thing in
could-
between the two might be.
Scott, you could have somebody that rents their house every June 1st and has done that for years, and then they come up with this thing, with this, and they haven't completed it on time. Again, I think it would be very reasonable to give conditional approval until they know otherwise.
What about like a grandfather?
Well,
Friendly for grandfather.
in some cases grandfather, but some cases somebody might buy a new house, or somebody already set up to rent it, and then they gotta go through this process, which could take 3 or 4 months. You know, let them rent it, and then when we finally get to the approval process, we either approve it retroactively or we don't. And if we don't do it, approve it, then obviously they can't go forward. But I don't see any reason why, you know, based on what's currently going on, that we couldn't give that kind of a conditional approval.
I feel though that maybe they'd have to pay extra for it, but I think it should pass the inspection, even if you're gonna do something like that.
Well,
That was my question. When does the inspection occur? Before
that's
or
what
after the
that's what we
approval?
don't know, because we don't know how much of a backlog we might get here. And I think it's unfortunate to put people in that position that they can't go forward with their plans, and then, again,
I
get that.
guess if it were possible, and I think there's a legal question probably here, but if it were possible, I'd be comfortable with that for current operations that are going to be grandfathered. But if it's a new operation, I think
Well,
that's
let
where
me,
it should.
let me just add another point, that they would only get this conditional approval if they filled out all the paperwork. And if they filled out all the paperwork, then
And they
why?
have to have pass the inspection too, I would think.
Well, oh, yeah, no, I mean, everything would have to work, but it might take 3 or 4 months, we don't really know.
Yeah,
And
well-
why should they be held hostage?
I think your point's reasonable. You know, when you take a look at it, if Scott's correct, and we have 150 properties or so that are currently involved in the activity, and we get this regulation passed, voters all say, yep, we want to do this. And now we've got this in place, and everyone's clamoring, knocking down doors at the town offices here, saying, I gotta get my permit, or they find it online, because that's where it'll be. But they fill out all the stuff, so they do everything they're supposed to do. and then they go, oops, well, Jay is not available this week, and, you know, Kevin's not here to do that, or, you know, they're doing it, but they're doing 10 or 15 this week, and the queue is 100. And, oh, by the way, I'm continuing to do my business. I think this is what you're describing.
That's what I'm describing.
And I think it would be unreasonable to say to someone, yeah, okay, we just put up this new law, regulation, and it says you have to have this stuff in place. And so we either need to come up with a way that says, you need, if you meet all the requirements,
You pay your.
and you paid your fee, you've made your submission, you get I guess you'd have to say you get some sort of opportunity for a tentative approval or something like that says you can operate unless you get a disapproved.
Exactly.
Well, what happens if you have people that have been renting their house to the same people
That's what I'm
every
saying.
year, you know, and they come up, you
But
know,
aren't they grandfathered?
Mhm.
No, please, sorry. There's no such term in the Hampshire RSA as
as
grandfather.
grandfathered.
There's only non-conforming uses or conforming uses.
There's an RSA that would grandfather these operations.
Now, what happens if we did allow it? They've gone through the permitting process, but it hasn't been inspected yet.
Right?
What's the town's liability if say there's not a second egress and somebody's in that house, there's a fire and somebody dies from that?
And I got legal.
And we,
Again, we have a section here that says the responsibility is the homeowners, which it is now.
Yeah.
And it hasn't changed.
You
We are not assuming any responsibility by doing this. What we are doing is that we are saying we are going to look over the shoulder of the homeowner and say, are you doing what you're supposed to do?
I'm comfortable with that.
And I think that's part of what we have in here, responsibility. It's their responsibility to ensure that all these things are done.
You could clearly have in that sort of a conditional approval, you could clearly have that, anything that happens between now and then, the town is not responsible, you're
No,
responsible.
the town is never responsible, even after that.
Yeah,
Before, after, or during.
right.
Do we have to have it in writing?
It is in here. It says that. It says the homeowner is responsible for the requirements. It doesn't say that the town takes any responsibility.
Sorry.
I think that's fairly clear.
And, ensuring that the occupancy limits are not exceeded, and who's going to go around and monitor that?
Monitor what?
Okay, the place is rented out, and they've told the people that it's going to be 5 people in the house, or whatever it is. Who's going to go around and see if there's only 5 people in there?
Our regulation doesn't limit how many people can use the house. It only limits how many people can be marketed for.
Well, I could be 4 people in the house, I'm not referring to that. I'm just saying who's going to go around and monitor to make sure that these people are compliant with what they're supposed to be, 4 people in a house.
There's
2
nothing in here
bedrooms.
that requires us to monitor that.
And how do we know it's actually taking place?
But we're not limiting how many people can use a house. We're only limiting how many people the house can be marketed for.
I think the
And who's
police,
gonna check that out? Go online, it says, 8 bedrooms, and which they do, they did it over.
Right. We're not required to pursue that sort of thing. If it's brought to the town's attention, if someone reports this place is marketing for 16 people and 4 bedrooms and whatever, then it is the responsibility of the town to follow up on that report. But the town does not have to necessarily doesn't have to go out and survey
That's what I meant by it.
I think Jay Henry made very clear that they're not gonna be, you know, peeping in the windows
Yes,
on everybody.
yes, okay.
So that's not gonna happen. I mean, what's gonna happen is, you know, somehow we get a complaint or somehow we see that there's 50 cars outside. That's when we're gonna go. But we're not gonna monitor, and it's foolish to try to monitor every single rental situation on every weekend. I don't think that's what we're all about. We're not into spying.
We also talked about that, not putting that.
Pardon?
Remember, we talked about not putting that in here, that we were gonna be watching and monitoring.
Right.
We made a conscious decision that we weren't gonna do that.
Because originally we talked about putting language in that would be more specific about who actually could be in there, and we don't really want to, we don't want to be in people's homes.
Well, we have written in here, ensuring that occupancy limits are not exceeded, and
Right, and that's the responsibility of the owner. It's the responsibility of the owner to have their property used properly.
And that's sort of,
it always goes back to that anyway, the owner.
I mean, that's sort of a blanket, I mean, that we don't have occupancy limits in Jackson. We have septic, but
Oh, actually, I understand that.
we don't really have an occupancy limit.
Okay.
And the regulation, the only limitation that the regulation specifies is how many people it can be marketed for.
I'm just gonna look to see if that's being done correctly.
Whoever wants to. I mean, the town can monitor it, the town can hire it out, or the town can just leave it and act when something gets reported.
Okay.
There is
Or
a,
it could be something that you just check when
Right.
then the application comes in.
Mhm.
Just-
Again, I think that the implementation on that will be up to the selectmen as to how they want to do that.
and there's a sort of, there's a business called Host Compliance
Mhm.
that works with municipalities to monitor both to create an inventory of what short-term rentals are within a community and monitor what's going on. But I saw an article that Killington is paying $130,000 to this company, so I don't see Jackson.
No.
Probably not.
There are tools out there, I guess, that, you know, as an example, one, probably not one we'll use, but there are tools also that can be
Well, I know
used to-
associations, closed communities, and everything else do have their own marketing, and they do not allow individuals to do it on their own. They have to go through them, so they know how it's being used and everything else.
Yeah.
But we're not a closed gate community, and we can't do that. I mean, but that's how it's done in other places.
And it really matters unless we have a problem.
Mhm. Right.
No, and again, if someone is marketing their product with more than what's allowed, they get their permit pulled.
Mhm.
Just straight off the top. Do you really want to do that?
As long as it comes to somebody's attention.
Right.
Mhm.
But if there is an issue, when there are issues, the issues are obvious, I think. When there are problems, when there are excesses, if you will, those are going to come to the attention of the town.
Yeah,
My God, you
look
can't
at it.
sneeze in this town without somebody noticing. Hopefully they say bless you.
Mhm.
The bottom line is maybe that we aren't looking for problems, but if problems arise, we'll do something. But I don't think we're out there checking on every neighborhood and every house and, you know, trying to find a problem. If that were the case, I'm out of here.
I
I
think
don't think the voters would vote. I think you'd have a
No.
tough time getting
it
this.
doesn't fit with what we're trying to accomplish here is we're trying to put out some regulations that help us to ensure that things are not done to excess.
Mhm.
That people make a reasonable use of their property, that, and in so doing, they do not disrupt the character of of the neighborhood. I think that's what we all, I think that's what we all agreed to is what our purpose of doing this was. And that we're not trying to establish a police state, we're not trying to establish any unreasonable regulation.
You need to bring that up, just like you just said it at the meeting next week, just like that, so people don't freak out.
Yeah. If somebody's doing something that's not right, we're gonna, I mean, it's gonna rise to the surface as quickly as it gets there, and somebody will look up and see that, they're advertising incorrectly, or they're abusing the use of the property, or whatever. It's gonna come up.
So the grandfathering thing is 674-19, where it says a zoning ordinance adopted under RSA 674-16 shall not apply to existing structures.
Which one is this, Scott?
This is 674-19. So a zoning ordinance adopted under RSA 674-16 shall not apply to existing structures or to the existing use of any building. So that's where any existing short-term rentals, that type of use is grandfathered. Or
And the term grandfather is used?
No, it says existing use.
so we can't.
We can't regulate existing use.
And that's what
Right,
grandfathering is.
Like, for example, Christmas Farm Inn is a non-conforming use.
Right.
It's not grandfathered.
Right.
It's a non-conforming
Well, it's
use.
grandfathered in the sense that we can't.
We can't create a regulation that undoes what they're doing.
Right,
That's right.
and that's a
That's-
grandfather.
And how is that any different from short-term rental? And that is also something, again, which we've had reviewed by legal counsel. And they've informed us that RSA applies.
I was just referring to the use of the word grandfather.
Right, it's a colloquial
Yes,
ism,
not a
if you
legal
will.
term.
You're right. But no, we can't countermand existing use. Would that be?
A use that was a use before the law passed
Exactly.
is an approved use.
Well, it's an existing use and we can't countermand an existing use.
Right. But that use then becomes non-conforming to the
Correct.
regulation.
That's correct. It would be non-conforming, yes, by definition.
And they're already monitoring the one or two houses in Jackson that have,
Have
there's been
issues.
a lot of complaints, yes.
Yes. Other changes, considerations, things that we should have thought of besides passing the joint.
Now I want to go talk to Jay Henry, just see if we can keep it that way.
A quick question, just throwing it out there. There's no mention about insurance.
Okay?
Do we care that they maintain some type of insurance or don't?
The homeowner again has to do that. There is rental insurance that if they tell them that's what they're doing, rather than telling your nephew standing there, the insurance is higher for the owner of the property,
So they tend not to get it.
most of the time.
Okay.
And
Again,
a lot of
we
homeowners says you
we
can't
don't
use it
wish
for
to
commercial
regulate
purposes.
Yeah.
people's responsibilities.
You actually don't have to have car insurance, car liability insurance in New Hampshire or Maine.
Which shocks me, I just found that out.
Well, I know, it's ridiculous. It's absurd, but you don't have to. But if you get in an accident, you may have to file some sort of a bond or something like that to continue to drive. But yeah, it's
Found that
live
out.
free or die. You don't get paid for it.
As opposed to like state of Connecticut, that if you don't have a certificate of insurance,
They won't sell your car.
that's it.
That's what I did, I brought my insurance card and the guy said, I don't.
What's that for you? And in fact, they do 100% compliance, they will not issue unless they have a direct link.
Bill, I don't want to get into this, but
Oh, no.
there's a
a state law that's coming on the books this week, and it's, you know, being in a realtor, they sent me a warning that I should, you know, go down to the State House and beat the hell out of somebody so they don't pass it. But it's actually fairly restrictive, but I don't have an opinion either way. But you might want to pass it
And
around.
that's already cities in New Hampshire. Basically, what this does is, it makes the property owner responsible
Right.
for the actions of the tenants.
Right.
And the problem with short-term rentals is that because they're short-term, the tenants are here and then gone, you know, they're not too concerned about the ramifications of their actions.
Right.
And so the only way to get the property owner to make sure that the tenants behave responsibly is to make the property owner responsible too. That can be done in cities in New Hampshire, it cannot be done in townships in New
Really?
Hampshire. So this bill is to change it for townships.
Wow.
I don't know how that impacts long-term rentals, and I can see that, you know, already you know, when we talk about available housing, lack of long-term rentals is a real problem. Part of that problem is due to short-term rentals, but part of the problem with long-term rentals is that it can be a real issue when you have a problem tenant, and trying to get that tenant out can take
Right.
6 months or more, up to a year sometimes. And so something like this, if this makes the property owner even more responsible for the actions of a long-term tenant, you know, that, I'm not sure how helpful that would be. But it's not brand new, it already exists in New Hampshire cities, or New Hampshire cities have the ability to enact something like this, so it's not like it hasn't been tested or tried in some fashion.
Just want to be aware of it.
Well, we put small towns on an even footing basis with larger towns. Nothing wrong with that.
Well, it seems like they would make homeowners comply more too if they were responsible for the actions of their short-term rentals.
You know, and if you're in the rental business, whether it be short-term or long-term, most rental agreements tend to have, you damage something, you pay for it, kind of thing. You know, I don't know what level of responsibility you put if you're a long-term rental. Oftentimes you have a full month's rent in abeyance.
Yeah. That's just an opinion piece, it doesn't really describe the law, so.
Yeah.
Well, I think,
And I don't know where, you know, where, you know, to what point do penalties apply to the property owner? You know, if there's, you know, activity going on that's, you know, a crime, that, you know, there's drug use or something, and people are gonna go to jail, does the property owner also suffer the same legal consequences? I'm not sure how that works.
Maybe
Yeah.
they allowed it, don't we?
I think what we have here is very good. I think it's very well balanced. Again, the only thing I would add to it was give that approval until rejected, so people don't have to wait around. I think that would disrupt people's business, their, you know.
Yeah.
Is that here or is that an implementation?
To me, that's an implementation process.
Some of the things that we've put in, you know, things that we've added to the zoning ordinance, down the pike as it's being implemented, problems come up that we never anticipated. And so then there's a need for changes. And so if problems do come up, I mean, if this gets approved and applied, and then there's some problems that come up, then it's not cast in stone. It is.
And this is more likely to be a problem up front. You know, once we get through the existing
Exactly.
operations, I
Yeah.
think it's gonna be
It might be a 6 to 9 month problem.
And so, I don't know, maybe rather than doing a conditional approval per application, we have a 6-month grace period. you know, within the 6 months, you have to get your application approved or something like that.
Well, that would be hard to determine as well. We don't know, you know, I think putting a time limit on it could be a mistake. We could get overwhelmed.
I think it's probably a good question for Peter,
Yeah.
as to whether a conditional approval.
Or, yeah, is there something that we can say on an implementation basis that we, you know,
Well, we give conditional approvals for subdivisions.
yeah. We do, but, and that's something that's approved as it's a conditional approval, but it's an
It's
approval,
conditional,
so.
Right.
But I don't think someone could sell, you know, a new lot with only a conditional approval.
Yeah, because our conditional approvals are usually is because
There's-
the Mylar's missing or
Right.
they
There's
haven't
no-
received, we don't know the number of the permit from the state or something.
There's no
like that.
activity that's occurring based on that conditional approval, I don't think.
Well, again, they have to have all the paperwork in and all this, and then you're okay unless we turn you down later on. That's all I'm saying.
And the people that already do the short-term rental, you don't have to fill out any applications or anything else, is that correct? Or do everybody that has
I think they would
short-term
have-
rental?
Everyone will need to
Yeah.
apply.
And they would still be, you know, up for inspection, because all we'll be doing is inspecting for existing, you know, safety.
And anybody who's doing it already can look at the list and say, okay, yeah, my smoke detectors work, yep, my windows work, yep, I know, okay, I'm good on those.
Of course, most of them can say, oh, wait a minute, that smoke
I
detector,
put that
the upstairs
battery in the
bedroom isn't
attic.
working, and
No, maybe that,
maybe
maybe you could have
that,
changed
maybe
the
that
battery.
basement
This
is,
is gonna come up next week.
Yeah.
I mean, that's gonna be, if people show up, this question's gonna come up.
Sure.
I have 5 properties, you know, I don't personally, but you know, somebody's gonna say, I have 5 properties. I'm gonna have 5 properties in here, means I can't answer to your question, I'm not gonna be able to use my properties until I do this.
but as I said, I think we should try to get an answer from Peter as to what would be involved.
As whether or not it needs to be incorporated, whether or not it's part of the implementation process, or the extent that an existing use can continue until they meet the requirement.
Until they're rejected.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
Existing use can continue until they get a rejection.
Which
So
should take
doing
the,
it, then you're just going through the paperwork
Yeah.
and you're getting yourself on board.
I was just concerned about us having a meeting once, you know.
you know, well, I think the answer is that everyone who currently is doing this can continue on and despite this thing going, if it got implemented, they can continue, they're required to do it. But they would, in the interim, they would be able to continue.
Something like, you know, not that the US government, but you know, this new ID law that just went into effect, or goes into effect in October, it's been delayed for 3 years, actually 9 years. That you have to have the special ID number fly in October,
Oh, yeah.
driver's license.
Real-
And they
real
keep
ID.
delaying it, but they had a deadline. To Scott's point, do we say existing have 90 days to fill out their application?
No.
You know, I mean, I'm saying the real application.
Again, maybe just going back to the attorney and seeing, run a couple of these.
So I think we could spin around this all night,
Yeah.
until we know from an attorney, you know, what's legally possible.
Yeah,
what's
because we say one thing and then somebody says, well, geez, you know, you put in a thing that's not conscionable.
Do you talk to Peter?
We-
Yeah, okay. Just, you know, throw out a couple of,
Not gratuitously.
As authorized by the select board.
oh, that's right. We can't just
Willy-nilly.
call them up. Well, looking at the, and where is Dick to
Nobody's wearing a hat
to
tonight.
make a suggestion that, so I will.
Well, let me ask the question. Any other things that you feel that are truly missing or that we haven't addressed?
So next week, everything will be so we can talk to people to come. Everything will be, all the definitions and everything, and the numbers and everything will be. Okay.
Yeah.
So just since you told us what the official note here, I only noted 2 changes.
Right, I have the change in the inspection
And adding the new one.
and then the license and meals tax. And then we'll get hopefully some information from Peter as to what we could do.
All right, let me ask it differently. If we get word from Peter that we can put something in here for some interim process, is that something we'd support putting in? And if so, what's your thought? 90 days, 120 days? And he says, yeah, you can.
What would you be putting in? Is that non-conforming?
Basically
non-conforming
saying that,
uses?
and again, I don't know if we can do this, but if the idea would be, if I'm hearing correctly, to say that within the first 6 months of the implementation of this regulation, meeting the requirement for
The process.
the process will be considered a conditional approval or some sort of such thing. That you'd be conditionally allowed to continue whatever it is you're doing until we're able to perform all the required inspections. That's what I'm hearing, at least.
Yeah.
That's
No, I agree.
exactly what I'm
So are we
saying.
But you can
talking-
anyway.
Pardon?
You can anyway. You can be a if you are already renting out your spare bedroom with their Airbnb, you can continue to do it.
I think we can require that you apply and go through an inspection before you continue doing it. But I think what we're talking about is making sure that you can continue doing it.
And if-
But I thought that we couldn't grandfather
Yeah.
quotes.
No, I don't know how that parses. I mean, I think we can require that something be inspected to ensure that it's meeting current code, current law.
We can require current use to fit within the new regulations, even though we can't prohibit them from doing so.
But it may be that we cannot stop the operation until the town can perform that inspection.
And if you have 100 houses, Kevin
But
and Jay are gonna be really busy.
It-
And
And
who's gonna pay them?
we've already talked to them, and we've already said, and they've already agreed that they would be able to take care of the backlog within 6 months.
But it should also apply if I bought a house tomorrow and I hadn't been using it for that, but I do the application and all that stuff, I should get additional approval until you say I can't do it. So it shouldn't be just for existing rentals, it should be,
Yeah, my thought is that if we have a backlog of any kind and a reasonable time, that it should be something that
okay.
would allow you to, again,
I think we're all on the same page.
So what I'm gonna be, what I think, when it's me or Bill asking Peter, is it better to have a conditional approval per applicant, or is it better to have a general grace period starting from the point when you implemented the regulation to 6 months later?
Semantics.
That would do it on an individual basis.
And then is,
yeah, I agree, it would be better if it were, from the time that you apply, that we'll agree. It's okay if you've met all the requirements of the application permit, that you can proceed.
until such time the town reviews the application and
Right.
issues an approval or denial.
Is that kind of where we're headed?
Except what happens to the person that says, okay, I've got 6 months, and they wait until the end of 6 months.
No, I think.
No,
what we're
it
saying
says
is do it
that
by
they have to apply, and
Must have to
they get to apply and go ahead, but if we come out and we do the inspection, and say,
a week later.
a week later, or 6 months later, we can pull the plug on.
But there is no, doing it that way, there's no specified time period. I don't think it would ever get to 6 months. It would be,
But
a couple of months.
I mean, as far as some people dragging their feet to fill out an application.
Because the application had to come back to us, don't they, for us to approve it, according to what we have on here?
it's correct,
Right. I mean, I guess the question is, once we get past the backlog period, do we, once we're getting applications in 1 or 2 a month, if that, then do we still want to have a conditional approval for those, or?
Probably don't need it, but I don't think we know the answer yet.
But are you saying that the person doesn't even apply?
Yeah, they're dragging their feet to
The
apply.
current person doesn't even come in and apply?
If they don't apply, they can't do it.
Yeah, I think, well, that's a question for
Okay.
Peter.
That's what you were.
Kathy was saying, who pays for it, but I think that was already discussed, was that the applicant pays for that inspection. We charge a fee that's going to already at least cover, yeah.
We'll have to look at that one.
I make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
So, for the notes, for the capital improvement, we'll just follow up on it again for the minutes.
Dick's not here, and I know he's been with all the department heads to find out, and I know that it's been ongoing. So, we haven't had anything finalized yet.
Okay, there's your update,
Okay? Just trying to keep.
met the agenda requirement thing.
They haven't had everything done anyway before the town meeting and everything else, and, so, I know, like I said, I know they're working on it, so.
Capital improvement plan is not something that has to be authorized by the town. It's, that
It's
is,
something that we do.
that is ours, so, it's also something that we don't really have a time limit on. To Jerry's point earlier about master plans and capital improvement plans, they're supposed to be done every 10 years. They can be done more frequently, and apparently less frequently if you forget to do it. Sure.
Do you have a public hearing scheduled?
Public hearing scheduled for this coming Thursday.
And what will you present to them?
The thing that will be presented is that which has been posted, which we worked from this evening. And we will, at the public hearing, identify that between the posting and the public hearing, that the planning board has looked at their work and already identified 2 items that they would like to make changes. And we'll identify those at the meeting and then work from there.
Would that require a second public hearing then?
Yes.
We will require a second public hearing regardless of what goes on at that first one.
But I think if the only change, we're changing the joint inspection to either or. I
That would be
think
housekeeping.
That might be housekeeping. The requirement of
The requirement for the permit, for requiring that they have the tax thing, that would be a change, and that automatically already gives us an opportunity for a second public hearing. So, yeah, we're in the soup for that one.
At
And so when will that
one of the
second one be?
One of the questions regarding the public hearing, when would the planning board vote to recommend this ordinance?
Town meeting, isn't it?
Second.
No,
that's
it's
second meeting.
following the public hearing,
Following the public hearing?
Yeah, that's usually what it's for.
because we don't really have anything with public input other than very brief responses from, say, you or a couple of other folks who have visited with us. And that's not adequate for us to recommend something until we get public input. I heard a motion for adjournment.
Second.
I heard a second from Mr. David.
I'll give you a third if you want.
Since no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.